let's start off with the shittiest fight on the card and work from there. They said, no, let's get it off rolling right. First fight of the year on Contender Series, undefeated, Tuan Ho, 6-0. This guy also has an amateur background, right? Lone'er Kavanagh, a guy, his amateur background maybe wasn't as impressive, but why is he here? He's been having viral highlight reel knockouts, also 6-0 as a professional, come through the Cage Warrior scene. This is a fantastic fight. It's a great scrap, but I would be doing a disservice if I didn't give the floor first to our guest, my brother Gordo. How do you feel about this fight? First fight of the night, first Contender Series breakdown. My brother, what do you think?
Oh, man. You know what? When we're talking about breaking down these fights, we're in August. We're doing this one on Sunday night. And when you're doing the research for this one, it's like, okay, let's dive into some regional scene tape. Let's see what's going on. Sometimes they're not that good. Sometimes they don't deliver. This fight's going to deliver. And I'll tell you this right now. These are two prospects who could go out here at 125 and have some success in the UFC. You throw them in there, and I'll shout out my Canadian brothers, but you throw them in there against Malcolm Gordon or anybody like that in the division, and they're smoking them. These guys, I do think, have potential to have some success out here. And I am really intrigued why this fight's opening up, but you could not be happier to start off Dana White Contender Series with this fight here. It's a really fun one, 125, and I do think it's one between two guys who could have some promise. You look at the guy here, Lone'er Kavanagh, the favorite coming into the matchup, a guy who has had those highlight reel knockouts like you've mentioned, fighting over there in Cage Warriors. He's got some really good in and out movement, only 25 years old, and he has utilized that knockout power, that good in and out movement. And the first thing you realize when you watch that tape is the hand speed. He's got good hand speed. He's got good footwork, and he's able to put that all together. And against those opponent in Cage Warrior, have a lot of success. He fights pretty smart. He has a very good tools with the leg kicks and fighting through processes, and he's able to mix the fight up. He does have some decent offensive wrestling, but he doesn't use it too much. His bread and butter is the in and out movement, the boxing, and the potential leg kicks on the feet. He does have 3 of his 6 wins by knockout, but I mean, the guy is a decent minute winner. He is a guy who can go forward and go out there and throw some good volume to win optics. There's some decent power on the other hand. Then you look at Tuan Ho, right? LFA guy, 23 years old, a ton of power in the hands. And this guy is a human highlight reel. He's got a ton of forward pressure. He will throw with fight any intention, and he's fun to watch. I think when we look down at it too, this guy is a guy who's still improving with the technicality, but he can throw bombs. He can go out there and he can really make like the crowd up. So when we look at a guy like this, I think Tuan Ho also has a decent ground game. I think he has the ability to be very aggressive when it comes to it, maybe a bit more submission over position, but a guy who will deliver these finishes. I know I'm talking a lot. I know I'm excited for it, but when it comes down to breaking down this matchup, I really do think it's a matter of the better minute winner, the in and out movement, a guy who's willing to slow the fight down, and Lone'er Kavanagh versus a dangerous guy here in Tuan Ho. Tuan Ho has the fight ending an opportunity. He's got really good looping shots, a ton of power on them, quick hand speed, and although Lone'er Kavanagh has some phenomenal in and out movement, he leaves his head on the center line and he's there to be hit. So I do think someone like Lone'er Kavanagh can be hit and clipped by someone like Tuan Ho. And I do think if a finish materializes, it's probably from the Tuan Ho side, not only due to that power on the feet, but he is a pretty dynamic submission grappler if he gets those opportunities. At the end of the day, though, I do think it's a spot where if we're looking at the line, I think if I'm playing Tuan Ho, I'm probably playing him inside the distance, probably playing him by KO, because I do think at the end of the day, the better minute winner here is Lone'er Kavanagh. So gun to my head, I'd probably lean towards the skills and the well-rounded skill set of someone like Lone'er Kavanagh. But man, that finish is on the table for Tuan Ho, and if I get a good enough number, I will play that with no hesitation.
You know, my brother, this is a fight where I couldn't get an easy read here, right? I think that, first of all, they have a lot of similarities in their style, right? And when you think about fighters like that, that's always going to be something that could lead to a little bit of a gridlock, right? Like both these guys like to spin. They like to take a lot of chances on the feet. And I think that when you look at an Tuan Ho, he's a lot more confident in terms of his hands. I think that Lone'er Kavanagh likes to set everything up behind the kicks, get to the low kick especially, get the guy off balance, and then he starts to open up with his shots a little bit more. And he did actually show that good, wrestling pressure in that last fight that he had in the Cage Warriors scene, especially in that third round. I was impressed by the cardio. He was pushing it late into that fight, still looking for the finish, trying to work deep into the decision there. So I think he's a guy that's got pretty good cardio, but he's wearing damage in a lot of these fights. And for Tuan Ho, the one thing I noticed that he's very good at is when he does get buzzed, when he gets rocked on the feet, he closes the distance very fast, right? And one of the things I also noted, the MMA Lab, they just have this like really good hotbed for talent right now in this division. Sean O'Malley, Marcus McGee, among others, right? Mario Bautista. You just think of the killers that are in the room with this guy all the time. And that seems like a great place to train and get better. He's got a lot of experience now, both in the LFA, but also on the amateur scene. And you look at the Lone'er Kavanagh side, there are some concerning, pieces of footage in the amateur record, especially, and it's not really as glaring on the Antoine Ho side. When he's faced adversity, he's been able to deal with it. He's been able to come back. And one thing that I do like for the Lone'er Kavanagh side in terms of his improvement, the guy who submitted him, he's one of his training partners now, right? So he's working on that aspect of his game. He's trying to improve those things. Great Britain top team is also a pretty solid team in its own right. He's got good skills. He's got the ability, I think, to draw out some counter opportunities here. But I think Antoine Ho has shown a pretty solid chin. And when he does get buzzed, like I said, does a good job of avoiding real damage, right? By getting a hold of somebody, taking them to the ground, or creating a frenetic exchange. And the knee bar that he got, the rear naked chokes on the regional scene, those are things that could translate to, potential potent grappling offense in this spot. And we're constantly reminded at times that, fighters can be great from all over the world, right? There's all kinds of different skills you can bring in, but oftentimes the best, wrestlers and grapplers are coming from certain parts of the world, and it's Dagestan and the United States of America, right? It's like Russia and the U.S. That's a lot of the great grappling talent that we see. Obviously Japan as well, and insurgents recently, but I'm just talking about, like, broadly speaking, Brazilians as well with the jiu-jitsu. But when you're just talking about pure, like, wrestling pedigree, who's getting on top in a lot of these exchanges, it tends to be American fighters that have been tested with a lot of American wrestling talent constantly throughout their training sessions, whereas there might only be one or two people that can wrestle at a high level in some of these MMA gyms around the globe. And you can only get as good as your environment, right? If there's not this people that can push you in that regard, when you get exposed on these higher levels, it can be a lot more difficult. So I think that's the biggest susceptibility for Lone'er Kavanagh is how does it translate outside of Cage Warriors? How many guys have we seen put in a great, effort in Cage Warriors, in the grappling, especially, Gordo? And then when it comes to the UFC, that skill set just doesn't necessarily translate. And that was his weakness prior. It's something he's been working on. He's trying to improve that area of his game, but definitely a susceptibility. We got a special guest. I'm happy to announce our boy Piers, rounding out the trifecta, the king of the regionals, the king of the Contender Series. Welcome back, my brother.
What's up, guys? Y'all ready for a brand new season of Tuesday Night Fights? I know I am.
Hell yeah, my man. What do you think of this opener, brother? We got Antoine Ho and Lone'er Kavanagh. I think it's a fun scrap, great fight. Both guys going to take a lot of risks with the spinning shit. What do you think's going to happen here?
Well, my first thoughts are this is criminal that these two have to fight each other, man. I've been more so a big fan of Kavanaugh because, I'm a big Cage Warriors guy. And ever since he landed that pole counter on Ryan Morgan back in the day, there's just something about this kid that I thought he was special. And it's nice that he's finally got his chance in the UFC, but they're not giving him an easy fight here in Antoine Ho. I mean, I think Antoine is very dynamic in his own right. I mean, both these guys have a hell of a highlight reel, and I don't know. I'm gonna go with my gut. My gut says Loner is special. I think this kid has top 5, top 10 potential in the UFC. It's like not many guys on the regional scene can strike like him, and his takedown defense is very elite. And Ho has good grappling. I mean, I think wrestling was his base, but it's a tough fight to get a read on because it's like these guys are so good, and it's like you're trying to point out flaws in each of their games, and it's just hard to really see much. I guess I'll say Loner. He's probably more polished, more seasoned, and Ho is a bit more spazzy, but that could lead to Ho finding a finish. I do think the under could be interesting just solely on the fact that it's like both these guys fight at a high pace, and we have seen Kavanaugh, to be fair. He's been dropped multiple times. And I don't know if he's chinny or just the way he enters the pocket, leaves himself open. But yeah, under plus 180 right now, 2.5 is not the worst look, but yeah, I think the price is pretty accurate, honestly, but I don't blame Antoine Ho bets as a value play.
And if you think he can D up takedowns, I mean, that would be the thing that I think opens up Antoine Ho to getting knocked out. I mean, like, he's still a guy who takes a lot of chances, keeps his hands a little bit low when he's exchanging. And so he gets buzzed a couple times in these fights, but he's just like very quick about grabbing a hold of somebody, taking them to the ground, initiating that exchange. But if he's not getting the takedowns, it's like, yeah, you can grab a hold of somebody that, what is that, 5 seconds, 8 seconds before they separate, start throwing again. So that is an interesting dynamic in this fight.
I gotta ask, does this
Yeah,
fight
go
count
ahead.
as Asian on Asian violence? I see my boy Loner's repping the Chinese flag, but you wouldn't know if you didn't have it on Tapology.
Yeah, and he's fighting out a Great Britain top team as well. So he's doing his thing. He's got a bunch of different flags. And Antoine Ho, he represents, I believe, Vietnam, but he's also a guy that's training out of the United States and getting, great work every day here. So I suppose it is in name only, right? But in practice, I think you got two guys that are both well prepared, and either one of these guys getting a UFC win in the future, not surprising to me, right? So it's like if either of them are to lose here, it's not the end of their story. They're not like, oh wow, what a failure, it's all over. It's like, man, they're just putting iron on iron and finding out who's ready right now. The loser of this fight is going to be in the UFC within 2 years, I would imagine. You guys all feel the same way?
Yeah, and I don't want to get too nitpicky on this fight here. I think that the under is probably a good look. I think if the good KO line comes out of someone like Ho can be played here as well. But the one line I will be looking at, and maybe this is getting too fancy on it all, but maybe some Tuan Ho finish only if that line's good enough plus money, because I do think more times than not, Lone'er Kavanagh has the minute winning opportunities, being the more polished technical fighter of the two. But I think Ho throws with fight ending intention, and you look at a guy like Kavanagh who has been rocked, who does keep his head in the center line, and although he does have that footwork to get out of the way, he is someone who I do think is more susceptible to damage in the spot here. So I think if that line comes out with a decent amount of juice, maybe I'll play that, but maybe not get too fancy on the first fight of the first card of DWCS Contender Series this year.
Absolutely. Last things I wanted to note here, guys, are just some of the intangibles in terms of the height, the reach, things like that, because I don't think that we noted it off the top. You're looking at a Lone'er Kavanagh here who's standing 5'4", so not very tall, right? But he does have actually the reach advantage. So despite being the smaller fighter, he's got like a half-inch reach advantage. I think that the size should be relatively equal here, but I am interested to see them size up a little bit at the weigh-ins. Both these guys look like they're in tremendous physical shape. They both look like they have a good athletic build as well. Just a couple of things from my notes. But with that being said, folks, we can move along to the next fight.